This is the story of a Learjet 24, tail number Delta Charlie Mike Mike Mike. On the 15th of September 2012, a Learjet 24 was to fly from Strasbourg Airport in Germany to Bornholm Airport in Denmark. The flight was a short one. The pilot expected it to take a bit over an hour. On the ground at Strasbourg, the jet was fueled up and the pilot ran the pre-takeoff checklist. That day, the plane had just one pilot and one passenger, for a total of 2 people on board. By 10:58 a.m., the jet took off bound for Bornholm, Denmark. Much of the flight went by without a hitch. That is, until the low fuel warning came on, halfway into the flight. The plane had a bit more fuel remaining, but the pilot had to make a beeline for Bornholm Airport, which was at this point 18 nautical miles away. If the fuel in the tanks held out, then they should be able to make it to the airport. At 11:32 a.m., the pilot canceled the IFR flight plan, that is the flight plan that he had filed with ATC, and started a visual approach to runway 29. He knew that he did not have much time left in the air, and he wanted to get down as fast as possible. As the Learjet slowed, it lost altitude. By 11:37 a.m., the plane was making the turn onto final. As the tower cleared it to land, it looked like the fuel-starved jet might actually make it. They were almost there. All they had to do was cover a few more miles and they'd be in the clear. They'd be at the airport. But as the plane made the turn onto final, their luck ran out. Both engines died. Their fuel had run out. The Learjet was now more of a Lear glider. The pilot put out 3 distress calls as the plane started to lose altitude. The jet passed over the beaches of Bornholm quite low, and it impacted a cornfield just short of the runway. The plane was destroyed, but the 2 people on board survived. Once this crash happened, a multitude of agencies got involved. The American NTSB, or the National Transportation Safety Bureau, the Danish AIB, or the Air Accident Investigation Board, and the German BFU, or the... you know what? I'm not going to try and say that. I'll just leave it up on the screen. Well, they all sent representatives to help with the investigation. But right off the bat, the investigators knew that something was off. The Lear 24 is meant to be piloted by 2 pilots, but the accident flight only had 1 pilot. But wait, it gets worse. In the pilot's personal belongings, they found 2 airline transport pilot licenses issued by the FAA. Both licenses had the same license number, but they had different names, and none of the licenses matched the name of the pilot himself. So the investigators had a bit of a John Doe on their hands. The NTSB and the BFU and the Danish AIB all went through their databases to see if they had issued a pilot's license to this pilot. But they came up with nothing. At the end of the day, the investigators had no clue if this guy was licensed or not. The Germans had more news to share. As it turned out, the pilot wasn't the only thing that was unlicensed. The Lear 24, tail number Delta Charlie Mike Mike Mike, did not have a valid German registration. On the 2nd of February 2012, the Luftfahrtbundesamt, I probably said that wrong, or the German Civil Aviation Authority, suspended the certificate of registration because the plane had a few missing airworthiness certificates. So, as per the rules, this plane should not have been flying, but it had been flying for quite a few months at the time of the accident. This is the investigation that just keeps giving and giving. When they got the wreck of the plane into a hangar, they could go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and what they found pointed to a plane that had ran out of fuel in midair. There are these bolts in the engine called the fuel filter bolts. Now, if the engines were fed with fuel, you'd expect these bolts to be full of fuel, but in this case, they were not. They went through the fuel lines. It was dry. The Lear 24 had 5 fuel tanks, 2 wing tanks, 2 wingtip tanks, and 1 fuselage tank. During the inspection, they found the wing tanks and the wingtip tanks to be completely devoid of fuel, but the fuselage tank, on the other hand, had 160 kilos or 352 pounds of fuel. This plane ran out of fuel with plenty of fuel on board. Now, don't get me wrong, that's not a lot, but it would have allowed them to get to the runway and maybe taxi to the gate. So why did the plane run out of fuel if it had plenty of fuel on board? Well, you see, the engines can only be fed with fuel from the wing tanks. So for the fuel to be of any use to the engines, you'd have to pump the fuel from the fuselage tank, or the wingtip tanks for that matter, into the main wing tanks. This was achieved by using fuel transfer valves. Guess what the pilot did? He left the fuel transfer valves in the closed position. So the fuel in the fuselage tank could not make it to the engines. Had he done that, he would have had enough fuel for maybe another 10 minutes in the air, which would have been more than enough considering that they went down just 1 kilometer or 1,100 yards from the threshold of the runway. That's not all. The way he fueled the plane was also incorrect. Their stated endurance was 1 hour, and he had planned for no alternate airports. Basically, he had taken off with no fuel margins whatsoever. Even if he had selected the fuel from the tanks, he would have been cutting it close had he needed to go around or divert to another airport for any reason whatsoever. But why didn't the pilot just turn the fuel transfer valves on and just land at the airport? Well, remember, he was the sole pilot in a 2-person cockpit. Landing is one of the most challenging parts of any flight, and he was doing the work of 2 people. And add to that an emergency fuel warning, and it is entirely possible that something as small as flipping a switch might have slipped his mind. This is as far as the investigation got, to be honest. They didn't have a lot to work with. They had no information on the pilot, no documentation of the plane or its maintenance history, no flight operational documentation, and absolutely nothing on the pilot. Like no flight training data, no license data, no flight experience data, and no medical data. How off the grid do you have to be for 3 government agencies to have no information on you? Also, how do you even have a job like this with basically 0 documents to back up your resume? So it's safe to say that this pilot was severely underqualified to be flying this airplane. The Danish AIB is just astounded that the plane was even allowed to fly in the first place. Quote, "From a systemic point of view, the AIB DK finds it thought-provoking that a non-registered aircraft was accepted by the regulated aviation system, bracket 12 times in 2012, end quote. But now I want to hear from you though. How does a pilot who is clearly inexperienced land a job like this? He made several mistakes that no experienced pilot would make. He flew without a first officer, he took off with too little fuel on board, and forgot where his fuel was stored. Those aren't mistakes that you accidentally make. Those are actions with clear intentions behind them. I for one share the astonishment of the Danish AIB. It's a miracle that this plane and pilot was allowed to fly, especially in a place like Germany, where regulations are so strict. What makes this accident interesting is not the fact that the pilot was unqualified. We have that all the time. But the fact that there isn't a paper trail. In most other cases, if you light your way onto the flight deck, there's a clear paper trail that shows exactly what you did and how you did it. But with this case, absolutely nothing. More interestingly, a part of the reason that the 2 occupants were able to walk away from this crash was the fact that the plane had very little forward momentum, and the fact that they landed in a field of sweet corn. The corn probably cushioned their fall a bit, and with it being a field and everything, there wasn't much to fly into. So, have you ever seen something like this? Have you ever just seen someone do something so badly that you have to ask yourself, wow, how did they get where they are right now? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But if there's one silver lining to this story, is that you can be anything that you want to be. If this pilot can fly a plane without a license, then you can ask that girl out. Thank you for watching this episode of Mini Air Crash Investigation. If you like the videos that I make, do consider liking and subscribing. It will really help the channel grow. I will catch you guys next time. Stay safe.